Chapter 1, Sean, the 30th of July, 2 p.m, Irontown, South Nordica. Sean Zoa would have laughed in someone's face had they told him his life was about to change forever. Not that he didn't risk it in the past, having practiced his ability to control the wind element. Something Temurian authorities would have his head for if they caught him in the act. But hey, he was by all means a good guy. Perfect, if he broke his habit of dancing on the logos of other college thrashball teams among his dirty style of play on the field. He smirked to himself as his lean face and wavy hair reflected from the side view mirror of his girlfriend's beat-up car rental as they cruised into the buzzing metropolis of Irontown, South Nordica. Lily slammed the brakes and threw him a glare, as if her icy blue eyes saw tin off Sean's skull and into his brain. Admiring yourself again? Is that a crime? It's annoying me, so stop it. Sean bounced his eyebrows and tore his eyes from the mirror. He'd have shot back a smarter retort. But given the number of stalled vehicles in front, he wasn't in the mood to face her wrath for an unspecified amount of time. What's with the tramp jam? She leaned against the headrest, eyes closed. Odds are, they've tightened things at their security checkpoint. I've been out of the Irontown loop for 2 months. Care to explain? Well, traffic's never this bad coming in and out of town. Sean rolled down the window and craned his neck, where navy blue patrol vehicles set up a highway roadblock at the exit into Irontown. We're going to be stuck in this for over an hour. Lily ran a hand through her brown locks and over her watch, which brought up a hologram. Anything relevant? Scrolling through the news headlines, she shook her head, dissipated the hologram, and eased the junk heap forward. The closer they got, it showed Temurian security required vehicle occupants to exit and submit to a pat-down. Holograms glowed, displaying the standard ID check. A third and fourth security guard opened trunks and rummaged through luggage. Looks like they are doing some kind of check, Sean said. This happening often lately. He entered Irontown a few times per year, living in the area from August through December, and again from January until May before heading an hour north of the city back home to the small town of Wild Valley for 2 months. During the summer, he'd visit Lily on select weekends. But this year, he kept his distance, given her increasing shortness, like berating him for looking into the side view mirror too long. Before, security checks in and out of the city were nothing more than ID and vehicle confirmation, a questionnaire, and a further search at the guard's discretion. Perhaps Temuria employed a set of new guards in training, and the in-depth checks were nothing more than repetition. Then again, news reports and overhead digital signs on the highway pointed this out, advising drivers to use another checkpoint off of a different exit. You don't think they are checking for mutant ability? Sean said. Lily winced. Like him, she was born with a mutation. Smoke control, a niche mutation associated with the fire and water elements. And if Temuria checked for this, he and Lily would never see the light of day again. Temuria would execute them for practicing the mutation they were born with, per their Mutant Safety Act, passed following the 10-year war 20 years ago. If it is, how do we get out of it? He said. We're both higher than base level. Lily's knuckles turned white from gripping the steering wheel. Let's just hope it's an expanded weapons check, or something. Sean again craned his neck out the window as Lily inched the old car closer. They were now close enough to make out where the security forced those possessing a mutation to display their ability. Temuria trained these officers to spot an advanced level with the sample movement. He shook his head and smiled. Looks like they are targeting people our age, but no actual test. I saw an F at the bottom of that last mutant's ID hologram and no one threw you an ember. But why are they targeting college kids? She again brought her hologram up, where a news headline stated something about Temurian military clashes with local militias in the East Oceanics region and Oceanaway, where the Empire remained militarily involved over the past decade following a group of attacks on Temurian bases scattered outside the region. Traffic moved again. Lurie dissipated the hologram and edged forward, this time stopping in front of 4 men dressed in navy blue military uniforms. A burly guard approached as she rolled down her window, one hand resting on the pistol in his belt. "Step out of the car and place your hands against the windows." Lurie threw Sean a frightened look. He shmgged, kicked the door open, and obliged as another guard, a thin man around his age, patted him down for weapons. Butterflies squirmed in his stomach. But if he at least remained calm, Lurie wouldn't freak. "Identification," the man said, his voice nothing more than a deadpan. Sean waved a hand over his watch and expanded the hologram. "Genetic mutation, oh." The guard glared at Sean. "Yes, sir. No mutant swords or unlicensed weapons in the vehicle pertaining to the mutation. I'm innocent." The man nodded to the third and fourth guards, who opened the trunk and rooted two off Sean's suitcases. "Keep your hands on the windows until given the all-clear." "Right on." Sean would have asked the reasoning for the in-depth searches, but the guard appeared in no mood for a chat. Plus, the theory of new recruits went to the wayside. He'd crossed paths with this guard upon exiting Irontown for Wild Valley last year with his cousin and thrashball teammate, Erno Karko. Since Lurie lived in the city, she rarely put up with searches. But from her broken-down home in the district of Irontown Heights, she had a good vantage point of the highway and whether these checkpoints backed up traffic. The man returned to Sean. "All right, you are free to go." Sean inched back into the rusty vehicle. Lurie eased the throttle, and they took off for the car rental building to return the ride. "What in the world was that all about?" he said. She turned off the highway and started toward downtown, where they'd take public transport back to Irontown Heights. "I don't know, I'm not a spirit mutant. But something big is about to happen. I can tell you that much." He arched a brow, eyes again on the side view. "What makes you think that?" She nodded toward Main Street, which led to the square and Irontown's City Hall. Military trucks lined the streets and soldiers manned every corner, speaking into radios while residents scurried by. Those in the older age brackets smiled and nodded to the soldiers. Others even engaged them in conversation and pointed out their younger family members. However, people closer to Sean's age looked confused, disheartened, and scared. Lurie tossed him another uncertain look, and this time his gaze matched hers. She was right. Irontown, while facing tight security like Eve 1Y major metropolis in the South Nordican colonies, never saw such military presence. Chapter 2, Raj, the 30th of July, 2:30 p.m., New Nordican City, South Nordica. Raji Worthy sat in front of a large makeup mirror. Draping a cape around her front, she awaited her usual hair and makeup artists to get her ready to attend the summer's grandest movie premiere at the Garden Theatre, the largest and most luxurious show venue in South Nordica. Her attendance was intended to improve public relations with the South Nordican colonists to further accept her as the next supreme leader of Temuria's South Nordican colonies. The more she attended these events, her relationship grew with the public. Especially when she strode to the crowd, signed autographs, and posed for photos with screaming fans. As Raj waited, she read over the script, biting the side of her cheek to keep herself from unlocking her hologram and lashing out at her commander. First date with Lieutenant Igor freaking Alton? Seriously? Nothing was more annoying than watching someone cheat their way to IVU, the top college in the colony, before doing the same as a grad student over in the Temurian Military Academy at South Point, South Nordica's most prestigious service branch. But there was Alton, using his father's connections to South Nordican and Temurian brass to get by. Though she'd admit to herself there wasn't a blood master out there more talented in hand-to-hand combat. Since Alton owned a lethal sword of blood, His niche mutant ability evolved unlike any other mutant master Raj had met. Yet, to begin an arranged relationship with the guy? What in the world's name was Lord Chiyuka thinking? Goodness, every prominent male in the colony would queue up asking for her hand. Couldn't she choose this one important aspect in her life that involved spending eternity with someone? Of course not. He'd chosen Alton for a reason. Raj knew Chiyuka's thought process regarding public relations. But it didn't mean she fell in love with it. Of all the perks that came with belonging to society's elite. From owning her Sword of Fire and reaching Fire Master status during her freshman year at IVU to the next in line to rule the colony, this stupid script made her envy the public, those whose jobs in Chiyuka's words were to work, breed, pay taxes to support their empire, and die defending it. Ironically, the public envied her. About every girl in the empire would crave to attend a movie premiere in a dress that cost more than their family's household income. They'd fantasize over posing for photos that would amra in all the major magazines and online publications. Or sharing cocktails with South Nordica's most famous celebrities, and interacting with the colony's most powerful politicians. But movie premieres and lavish trips grew old. The initial excitement of meeting the biggest names in South Nordica paled after a few repetitions. Pre-arranging what would become a future marriage often made her question if it was worth owning everything and living in a mansion so large she never entered half of its rooms. Even if it had been her home since her mother died when she was 4. Raj shook her head and tossed the script onto an adjacent chair. She'd shred it after this hair and makeup session. If word reached the public that her engagement to Alton was nothing more than a PR stunt, Chiyuka wouldn't let her hear the end of it. Instead, she had to convince them all that she fell for Alton the second she laid eyes on him at this premiere. It was simple. Let paparazzi catch them together and the journalists would go nuts over the story across the colony. Rumors would spread between the public, and the world would watch them from this evening forward, until the most lavish wedding of the century played out a year or two from today. The ideal scenario? The public would place their faith in Raj and Alton, as they had in Chiyuka and her mother during the war. Which, of course, would keep the people united against their enemies in Iberia, Nordica, and anyone else who threatened Temuria's influence anywhere in the world. She smiled to herself and shook her head. Nah, maybe marrying that idiot wouldn't be so bad. The unity that would come from the marriage, pre-arranged and loveless though it was, granted Raj her birthright. She had a duty to perform for the South Nordicans. Ditto for Alton. And that duty was to protect the South Nordican colonists and Temuria's interests. Raj reached over and looked over the script again, thinking herself selfish of even considering ridding herself of her status. Chapter 3, Valkyrie 1 week prior. The 25th of July, 12 p.m., the Western Reserve of South Nordica Valkyrie Siskonen stepped off the underground network subway that secretly connected the largest cities in Nordica to specific regions in South Nordica. Her guardian, Nordican leader and University of Nordica President Cole Eriksson, ordered the Nordicans to build them during the 10-year war to shuttle dissenting elementals, known here in South Nordica as mutants, to the 13 counties north of the Lapland Mountains that served as the South Nordican border. While the counties failed to free their southern counterparts then, the networks remained in use to continue the job in which Nordica built them. As such, they gained thousands of elementals from South Nordica. And Lord Chiyuka worthy, at least to their knowledge, remained stumped regarding the disappearances. Valkyrie and her older twin brother Miko, who hopped off the subway and strode beside her, had ulterior motives for these networks. Since Nordica was such a small landmass, things got rather boring and like her brother, she held a thirst for adventure beyond the confines of the tiny country. She'd gotten it from her deceased parents, both of whom were killed during the 10-year war at Lord Chiyuka's hands, so they lied to Cole, claiming they were spending a week in another Nordican city, while in reality they'd sneak onto the networks and party in South Nordica. Thanks to black markets, they even secured fake IDs to venture into any club they wished. Best yet, their names landed in the South Nordican database under those IDs. So if the authorities came looking, they'd believe Valkyrie and her brother were lifelong New Nordican City, or NNC residents. Where should we hit up this time? Mikko used his watch hologram as a flashlight while they walked through off the darkened tunnel. The rave, definitely. Valkyrie also opened her hologram, where the photo of her favorite bartender smiled back on the wallpaper. His light brown eyes and wavy hair staring into her soul. Is that Blaze Nikean? Mikko said. Good thing it was still dark down here, even with the holograms, because Valkyrie's defined cheeks flushed. So what if it is? I can't have a relationship. Mikko shook his head. Cole's going to kill you. Oh, come on, Mikko, not all South Nordicans are bad. Most aren't. They are just brainwashed into thinking they're Empire's Trinity and Stoichia's gift to the world, when in fact, they are the Empire of Wars. I'm sure Blaze is a sheep, just like the rest of them. Then I guess I'll unplug him enough to defect one day, Mikko scoffed. Good luck with that. They approached the entrance, where a metal hatch towered over them above a set of stone steps. Mikko retrieved his sword of metal, ready to unleash his metal morphing ability, a niche element to the classical elements of earth and fire. He raced up the steps, pointed his sword to unmold the hatch, and swung to fling it 01 RN, causing the heavy rocks and logs lying above it to fly into the trees. The bright light greeted them, and Valkyrie shielded her amber eyes as the sun shone into the network and illuminated her auburn hair. Mikko climbed out, offered a hand, and pulled her upwards. Dang, that log went 100 feet. He pointed to a downed tree, where a 20-foot log the Earthmasters returned when sneaking into South Nordica replaced atop the turf covering the network crisscrossed over it, giving it the ominous look of a neat MNE. You're an E-shot, you know that. Valkyrie said. What? You're supposed to ease the hatch open and let them slide off, not fling them. Now the freaking network's open for the world to see. You realize what'll happen if a South Nordican loyal to that stupid empire notices it. Mikko lifted the turf and placed it over the hatch. There, now no one will notice a thing. Yeah, they'll just ask why the grass is a slightly different shade of green and why it's not growing along with the rest of the weeds surrounding it. Those rocks and logs were there for a reason. And they weren't there for you to see how far you could fling them. Mikko waved her off. Vork, how many South Nordicans venture this far off the path? It only takes one to notice something's off. And how many know the incantation to open it? It's intuito improvista male master, Valkyrie said, in the tongue of her ancestors. Exactly. Not a soul down here knows what it means, let alone speak it. It's wise not to take that chance. Look, let's just get to Magnuton so we can catch a ride into the NNC. Valkyrie hitched her backpack and buckled it around her waist. They'd stay here for a week before August 1st rolled around. Then, it was back to U of N to prepare for the annual Cardinal and White pre-season game to kick off the intra-university thrashball season. She threw another glance at the exposed hatch before stepping onto the trail, which sat 2 miles from the tiny village of Magnuton. Once they reached NNC, it was hotel, shower, and boom, party time. But first, they needed South Nordican coin, different from the sound monetary system Nordica used. You got the previews. Mikko patted his backpack. 100 copies. $8.99 Morpheus said he'll give us a straight-up $1,000 in cash and resell them for $20 apiece. Valkyrie grinned. $1,000 would take them far down here in South Nordica. And they'd have enough to sneak back down during the Yule holiday break once thrashball ended. Their connection, Morpheus, operated the black market in which they bought their fake IDs. He also ran the gambling operation and loved to resell and price gouge season preview magazines from the Nordican Thrashball Association, the University of Nordica's intra-school league, second tier only to the professional Nordican Thrashball League, to others involved in South Nordica's illegal gambling market. It was Mikko's idea to locate the market and sell off the magazines down here 3 years ago before their freshman year at U of N. And they'd been friends with some of South Nordica's most notorious black market profiteers ever since. With such a large stack and a wad of cash to spend down here, she'd think twice of using her blood mastery ability, a niche of the water and wind elements, on her brother for leaving the network's landmark exposed. Yeah, he was right. Odds were slim that anyone would discover the network, let alone know the incantation to 01R in it. Except South Nordica dwarfed Nordica. And odds weren't so slim that someone down here, somewhere, knew of Cole's ways. Valkyrie followed Mikko into Magneton over the next hour, caught the bus, and took the 1-hour ride to NNC, the capital of South Nordica, which housed everything from Lord Chuyuka's mansion to the colony's finest attractions. Though she couldn't care less. Blaze's face invaded her every thought. *I seek the knowledge of the world surrounding me. Chapter 4, Raj, the 30th of July, 5:30 p.m, New Nordican City. Raj looked over the script a final time before throwing it into the adjacent paper shredder. She strolled back into the prep room where her reflection stared back in front of a full-body mirror. "What do you think?" Sinja, her head stylist, said. "I think they'd mistake me as the Princess of Temuria rather than the heiress to South Norcan supreme leadership." "Your crew kills it, Sinja." He rested his hands on her bare shoulders, grinning. "We need to take some initial photos." Chuyuka's orders. "We post them to your Photoop account, the fans will go wild. They'll tune right into this movie premiere and watch you walk down the red carpet. Meeting anyone special?" Raj returned his expression. "I got my eye on someone. But you'll have to watch it along with the rest of South Nordica and Temuria. Let's just say my dress will woo them. They love it when I wear red." "Ah, so that's why Chuyuka ordered my stylists to pick it out for you. It's not why you've always highlighted your hair red? Had your eyes on them for a while?" She shook her head. "It's just to show off my fire mastery. Which, by the way..." Raj held out her hand and a bronze-hilt sword of fire manifested. She stuck it into the black sheath and again faced the mirror. "Beauty with might. Perhaps the deadliest combination of anyone in South Nordica." Sinja must have read Raj's mind as he paced around her. "You are hands down the most powerful fire master in South Nordica for your age, if not the entire Temurian Empire." Her smile deepened. "Given Temuria's military might as the larger of the world's two solar powers, with Iberia at a distant second, wouldn't that place her in prime position for the most powerful fire master for her age on the planet?" Sinja held up his index finger. "But here's the kicker, Raji Worthy. You're also, hands down, the most beautiful woman in the Empire, and I don't care how much higher regard King Magnu holds his full-blooded Urians. Just like your full-blooded Kalorman mother before you." His eyes grew distant. "And her mother before her, whom I had the chance to meet when I was first getting started. You know, I'm going to have to take your word on that, Sinja. I've never seen a picture of Mom. But as far as Chuyuka's concerned, I'm a carbon copy of her. And if your words and his words hold true, every bit as powerful of a fire master." Another stylist bustled in. Gray, the newest member of the team, swept his eyes from Raj to Sinja. "The limo has arrived, Lady Worthy." Sinja drew himself to full height. "Escort our lady to the doors and see her safely off. Are the guards stationed at the exits?" Gray bowed. "Indeed, sir." "Lady Worthy," Sinja repeated Gray's motion and gestured toward the door, "your luxury ride awaits." Raj flung her shoulders back and followed Grey from the salon, down a torch-lit corridor, a marble staircase, and through a set of oak where Temurian guards saluted her exit. Despite the advanced guard and Chuyuka's insistence for someone to accompany her wherever she went, Raj kept a hand clasped around her sword hilt. She was still a more powerful mutant master than those around her, and if it came to it, she'd save their lives before they'd save hers. Raj tucked herself into the limo, where her best friend snapped a photo before she flinched. Of course, Chuyuka would insist on picking up Fraser Norsk beforehand so she could post pics to main social media outlets, showing off her privilege of hanging out with South Nordica's heiress to supreme leadership. Plus, the journalists covering her for the evening would go crazy, reposting the photos to their own networks. Fraser passed her shot glass and by the smell of it, she brought the tastiest mead in the Temurian Empire. Raj clinked the glass with her best friends. How did you know? Fraser jabbed the pearl-hilt sword of spirit in her sheath. My vibe range has grown stronger by the day, my friend. Les showed me a thing or two. Sure looks like it. Heck, anything Les Lightning showed anyone spirit-related resulted in a spirit mutant, or in Fraser's case a spirit master, leveling up. Raj sipped the drink, which relaxed her body the second it travelled down her throat. But she couldn't get too relaxed, or else she'd slip the classified script to Fraser. Instead, you know who's going to be there tonight, right? Raj widened her aquamarine eyes as she spoke, adding a bit of fuel. Fraser pushed a few loose strands of silvery blonde hair from her face, drew up her hologram, and scrolled. It's a long guest list, Raj. Who do we got our eye on tonight? Raj shot her trademark lopsided grin. Igor Alton. I've kind of crushed on him since I was in grade school at Lord Timur Prep. Fraser's mouth formed a perfect O. Raj, with your talent, status, and grades, you could have started this thing off years before you met me. Raj shrugged. Yeah, but with my studies and college thrashball over at IVU, plus military and political career training as a grad student at South Point, I didn't have time for relationships. Especially with Chuyuka breathing down my back. Of course, this one sent Fraser into playing a game of I Never, in which each of the following questions involved relationships. Since Raj never as much as kissed a guy, it left her snatching what remained of their mead from Fraser's shaking hand. If the cameras saw her sidekick so out of it, especially an officer in the Temurian military like Fraser. Talk about another PR nightmare. Here. She held a glass of water to her friend's lips. Drink. It'll help you walk in a straight line when we get there. Fraser furrowed her eyebrows, but failed to hide the gloss film over her silver eyes. What's this? Another fine-tasting concoction? Raj tipped some down Fraser's throat and placed a hand over the girl's mouth. All right. Swallow. Good. Now, repeat. Her watch buzzed. Sighing, she set Fraser's glass of water in the cup holder and scrolled up. Yeah. Chuyuka's yellow eyes and flowing hair emerged. He looked somewhat deranged. Raji, we got a problem. Yeah, we do. Your top lieutenant here's so tipsy she won't even be able to hold herself upright when we get out of this thing. Now what do you want? Chuyuka locked his eyes into hers. You two aren't watching the movie. What did you mean we're not watching the movie? Isn't that the entire point of attending a premiere, or is this strictly PR? Your entire point for attending includes posing for photos and giving the normies something to gush about. Afterward, you're to head into the theatre on the red carpet, then you're going to follow Lord Syrian's men into the bunker for an emergency meeting. What are you talking about? She looked over the script about 10 times in the past 3 hours and it said nothing about an emergency meeting. Intel received disturbing news on the Tuscarora Reserve. Native mutants killed 100 Temurian peacekeepers earlier today. You didn't tell me you ordered an army's presence on a native Nordican reserve. And the Tuscaroras played hardball. Their warlords attacked our peacekeepers. We have a crisis on our hands unlike anything ever seen since the 10-year war. Why were you ordering troops onto the Rizu in the first place? You'll find out at the meeting. Raj gestured to her dress. Is this what I'm wearing? Yes, because you'll also be getting a few paparazzi pics with Alton this evening at the after-party. But first, we must take care of matters more important than a movie premiere. Got it? Fine. Whatever. I'll see you then. Chapter 5, Raj, the 30th of July, 7 p.m, New Nordican City photos, handshakes, sign autographs for clamming fans, hold Fraser upright. Repeat. Raj spent the last hour on the red carpet before two men in navy blue tuxedos locked eyes with her, blending in with the rest of the partygoers. She took Fraser's warm hand and pulled her into the theatre, thankful the girl didn't make a spectacle of herself, as was often the case when she drank too much. The men turned on their heels and marched into the elevator, holding the door open. Raj stepped inside and the older of the two closed the elevator door and pushed the button leading to the basement. She stepped out and followed the men into the unfinished space, where a stone wall featuring an ISA and Hegel rune stood to their right. The younger man strode to the wall, retrieved a diamond-hilt sword of water, and shot an aqua beam, where the wall melted and a bright, tiled room complete with the most up-to-date high-tech devices emerged. In the conference room, Lord Syrian stood and offered a hand, which Raj shook. Fraser attempted to do the same, but lost her balance. Care to brief me? Raj said. Or are we waiting for Chiyuka to make his grand entrance? Syrian narrowed his blue-grey eyes. Lord Chiyuka has informed me of nothing more than to meet him here. The commander held an ounce of impatience in his voice as he glowered at Fraser. Raj shmgged and planted herself into the seat opposite Syrian, pulling Fraser beside her. Sony about Lieutenant Norsk. She lost a drinking game earlier in the limo. Syrian bounced his eyebrows and eyed the entrance as his two guards flanked both sides of the door, standing at attention. You never answered my second question, Raj said. Is Chiyuka already here, or did he turn his little crisis into his own public relations stunt? Lord Chiyuka is last in the procession. I expect he will coax the normies when he makes a surprise amrerance, as he does all over the colony. Raj angled her head, fighting the urge to burn a whole chlu off the metal table. This was supposed to be her night to further woo the masses. Public relations stunt it is. All right, if Chiyuka's going to be another hour, why'd you order your guards to come track me down so early? You need something important, Syrian. Lord Syrian. She scoffed. It matters. A sneer erupted when he went red with fury under the eyes. Raj fingered her bronze hilt. One simple fire blast and the man would never see his lavish office, illustrious views of NNC's skyline, and the Western Reserve's outskirts again. But Chiyuka would flip if she eliminated one of his most trusted advisors. Too bad he'd retire and move to another portion of the empire by the time she took office. Still the spoiled little heiress to our Lord Chiyuka. Syrian's eyes remained fixed on the entrance. You know, Lady Worthy, my children grew up learning a thing or two about respect. Your children also grew up with who I assume were well-meaning parents who at least gave them a bit of leeway, no? Try growing up with Chiyuka and take my praise of your parenting skills as a compliment, because it's all I'm handing you. She grasped her bronze hilt, the natural rage of a fire master pulsing through her fiery veins. Lucky for Syrian, he again fixed his attention on the guards. A half-hour passed. An hour and a half. The filled with a half-dozen leaders from South Nordica before raucous applause, cheers, and whistles echoed above. At last, the man of the manufactured hour is here. Raj caused everyone but a still tipsy Fraser to narrow their gazes toward her. She tossed another lopsided grin. Chuyuka would run even his most important men and women flew off with his sword of wind if they spoke so ill of him. As for her, she could call him out on the pettiest things and wouldn't feel a slap on the wrist. All right, so perhaps another fine reason to be in her position. Insult or even engage in a verbal confrontation with the supreme leader, and get nothing in return. Wearing a navy blue tux with his hair back for the occasion, Chuyuka stepped forward with a line of guards flanking and following, his face full of apprehension. He motioned his right-hand guard to pull out a chair before planting himself into it, drawing up his hologram, and syncing it with the big screen on the side wall. So here's how we're drawing this up. As you know, we lost 100 men and women at the Tuscarora Reserve in the central portion of the colony. Here's the official story of Intel's investigation, which we already relayed to media outlets throughout the empire. Chuyuka cleared his T-note and scrolled to a set of slides. With the incoming number of recruits due to Operation 462, our training resources have become scarce all over South Nordica. Per passing of the Native Nordican Service Act following the 10-year war with mine and King Magnus' stamps of approval, Native Nordican reserve land must be the first to return to their rightful owners, the Temurian Empire, or in this case, the South Nordican colonies, when we see fit to use them. The Act requires tribal representatives of said tribe to negotiate an agreement in which Temuria would recover land via eminent domain and the tribe would take the leftover reserve lands approximately 25 miles from the acquired land, with the Temurian and South Nordican governments aiding in a reconstruction process. Every native Nordican tribe has this act on file and often, negotiations do the job. This was an outlier where native Nordican mutant warlords attacked our soldiers without reason following a refusal to negotiate. Raj crossed her arms and leaned back. What happened to the Tuscarora tribe? We sent reinforcements to secure the reserve and end the riots. We have disposed of every native Nordican mutant in the tribe. Raj twisted her lips. Even those who didn't take part in the riot. The reserve is gone, and the few survivors are en route to another batch of land. With nothing but the clothes on their backs. We will aid in the rebuilding process to a much lesser extent than usual. It should send a warning to tribes refusing negotiation on our terms. Chuyuka exited the slideshow and ran a hand over the video call button, where Igor Alton and Les Lightning stood, each holding glasses of champagne and donning the same tuxedos as Chuyuka and his henchmen. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know them, I'd like you to meet Lieutenants Igor Alton and Les Lightning, our heroes of today who still found time to speak with us and Temurian news outlets all over the colony from the Square Garden penthouse, home to tonight's premier's after-party. It was such a shock to discover Alton was on the Tuscarora Reserve doing who knew what to its residents hours ago that even Fraser sobered. Thankfully, the girl kept her mouth closed. But for the love of humanity, what time did Chuyuka this script of her meeting with Alton? Lieutenants, Chuyuka said, we would love to thank you for your service to the South Nordican colony and its Temurian Empire regarding your efforts to quell the uprising at the Tuscarora Reserve. You have shown TME loyalty toward your empire, and I will reward you beyond your wildest. Chuyuka's painted grin widened as he locked eyes with Raj before setting them on to Alton. As if it were his silent way of saying, I'm rewarding you with the heiress. So tell us, Chuyuka said, about the scene when you arrived. A strong vibe stated that whatever these cats said, Chuyuka scripted it out too, given the way Alton turned his olive face to his left as though reading Tlu off a teleprompter. Which wasn't surprising. As far as Raj remembered, public relations, and more public relations comprised Chuyuka's game. When I got there, you wouldn't believe how many bodies were scattered about. He shook his head, again veering his eyes to the left. It hit home, knowing we'd have to return their remains to their families in what they thought to be routine negotiations. It shows South Nordican mutants, native Nordicans, and our allies that this is the why. CHRONICLES leaned back, chewing on the edge of his urn. Elaborate. Why we engage in oversight on the living quarters of native Nordicans. Why we oversee those born with mutations who have yet to militarily pledge their allegiance to the Temurian Empire and receive training in a controlled environment. If we didn't have such restrictions, you would see this horrible situation erupt far more often, but more reserve oversight could have avoided thousands of deaths on both sides of the equation. Thousands of deaths? How many native Nordicans did they kill? Raj narrowed her gaze and prayed Alton would catch her vibe from wherever he sat, enjoying a glass of champagne in some NNC penthouse. She was all for punishing dissenters to the greatest extent of the law when justifiable. But so far, neither CHRONICLES nor Alton provided a legit reason for justification except for refusal to negotiate, which meant anything CHRONICLES wanted it to mean. Besides, he never briefed her on Operation 462. Lack of resources? With the tax monies he brought in? This was a freaking land grab for some reason known but to him and about 5 others. Les, would you like to add anything? CHRONICLES said. Lightning nodded his blonde head. I would just like to assure our non-mutant audience that this also serves as an example of why we are calling for stricter oversight of mutants. And we ask our mutant population to understand that it protects the non-mutant majority. He ran a finger down his pearl sword hilt. To our mutant population, we encourage that if you would love to utilize your ability, to enlist in the Temurian armed forces. We will be glad to have you. Igor, your thoughts? I'd like to say that none of us enjoy going into battle and punishing a group of people like natives or mutants. Especially as Les has shown, we are mutants, ourselves, and I too encourage you all to follow our paths. As we do get the best mutants in South Nordica pledging allegiance to their Temurian Empire. And let this tragedy serve as a reminder that we will let no threat, domestic or foreign, take away the safety and security of the South Nordican people. We owe it to you. Indeed, CHRONICLES said. Les, any more thoughts? We do this for the people of South Nordica's benefit. And we have all taken an oath to protect and defend you all to the best of our ability. May we all send good vibes into the world that something like this will never happen again, and that we can all stand united against anyone that threatens the people of South Nordica. I want to thank you too so much for your role in containing today's tragedy. I'm sure carrying out the orders to take out and relocate the natives at the Tuscarora Reserve was hard on you. Fraser waved and blew a kiss toward Lightning before the screen faded. Syrian leaned across the table. What's the plan moving forward? CHRONICLES' yellow eyes gleamed. Ready our new recruits coming in from CHRONICLES South Nordican outlets for combat in the East Oceanics. Mutants and non-mutants alike. We will set up their camp at what used to be the Tuscarora Reserve. Raj bit the inside of her cheek. Training new recruits in a new Temurtan base? That was lacking resources. She fought the urge to scoff and roll her eyes. The guy had enough bases and training outposts set up. An ulterior motive existed, and unfortunately she'd have to bide her time on this one. What was it, and why did he need it? CHRONICLES' painted emotion left him, with the usual fierce and determined gaze replacing it. And we can use today's little speed bump to further condition the normies to lean on us when it comes to controlling natives and normie mutants. He sneered. So far, they've demanded it, and we've provided. Sooner than later, they are going to line up and demand it with a smile and a bow. Even if it means usurping every last liberty they got. Especially since millions just tuned into that little interview. Before Raj processed what CHRONICLES said, he gripped her shoulders and shunted her from the hidden conference room. Come. It's now time the normies see you interacting and having a time with the South Nordican hero of the hour. Chapter 6, Valkyrie, the 31st of July, 7:30 a.m., New Nordican City. Valkyrie pouted in her queen bed and stared at the ceiling as the sun rose behind the grey curtains. She'd placed everything into wooing Blaze on this trip, only to discover he hadn't just left the area, he'd gotten engaged and married during their time apart. Clearly, she was nothing more than a backup plan, despite his promise he'd wait for her to return this summer. Goodness, what a difference 7 freaking months make. Sure, she had fun with Miko and dancing with random men during their clubbing tour. Well, she had fun until every guy she danced with tried coming onto her. Despite her love for partying, Blaze respected her straight-edge lifestyle. She didn't drink, smoke, or engage in recreational drugs, even if it served as Miko's favorite pastimes. And it seemed like every guy in the area minus Blaze wanted nothing more than to pressure her into things she wanted no part of. Why did every freaking piece of testosterone down here combine clubbing with drinks, drugs, and bedrooms? Was she the only girl on the entire continent who craved a good time without extracurricular activity? When 7:30 snuck, she took a pillow and flung it at her still sleeping brother. 01V. What? Miko drew up his hologram. You-ish, Vork, it's 7:30. What's wrong with you? Our ride leaves at noon, in case you've forgotten. I know what times the subs take off, and we got 4.5 hours. Good night. She sat up and flung off the covers, revealing her defined core, thighs and calf muscles protruding from the athletic shorts and sports bra in which she slept. I'd rather get there early. Why? If she were honest, the need MNE the 2 trees made when Miko crossed them last week returned to her mind. Over the last 5 days, other negative MNEs showed themselves in various forms. Whether in the sky, flew off branches and leaves in the trees, and once, ISA displayed itself when ice frosted over her glass of water. The more negative and frequent the appearing runes, the more it seemed they warned danger approached. Since it was their final morning, she took it as a cue to get up and get out. Listen, I'm sorry things didn't work with your boy toy. But it's sort of selfish to take it out on me. Valkyrie scoffed. You're not sorry. You've been trashed 24/7 since I had my heart broken. She stormed to the bathroom and turned on the hot water. I'll be out in 10, she shouted. And if you're in bed when I'm finished, I'm slashing you. Got it? Despite the fact he'd taken long showers all week to ward off his non-stop morning hangovers, Miko packed and was ready to go within 15 minutes after Valkyrie dressed in her favorite black sleeveless top and leggings that stopped at her shins along with a comfortable pair of training shoes. As a reward for his punctuality, she swept by the continental breakfast and let him pick out a pastry to stuff his face with as they walked into the early morning. Miko froze the second he stepped outside. What in Trinity's name's going on out here? In front of them parked several military TMCKs, each containing the Temurian crest. Soldiers exited, a few ushering high school and college-aged kids along the road, many of whom wore frightened gazes. Meanwhile, older men and women cheered the procession and watched with satisfaction. Need and the runes hath spoken. Miko pulled up his hologram. Come on, we got some time to kill. Let's see what it's all about. He finished his pastry and set off down a side alley, obscuring them from the soldiers' view. Hey! Valkyrie snuggled to keep up with her brother, whose strides lengthened. Miko, I really don't think we should push our luck. We've mingled with the black market twice this week. I've had to drag you out of 2 bars to keep your wasted butt from exposing your ability, and we had to flee a party that the Temurian Enforcement Agency broke up. Vork, I'm not sitting in front of an empty underground network and waiting. All right, I dragged myself out of bed at daybreak to please you. So now, you're going to let me have my fun? Miko. Valkyrie tried to grab the back of his jacket, but he flung her away. Please, listen to me for a second. Ah. He sped his pace, and even worse, manifested his sword of metal. If a freaking Temurian soldier glimpsed this, was he still somehow tipsy from the night before? Or was this, of course, it was. Oh, so classic Miko couldn't wait for something like this to happen. Increased presence of Temurian soldiers looking as though they had a blast bullying the locals. Locals their own age. The likelihood of him doing something beyond stupid increased tenfold. Revenge. Something he'd fantasized about on Temuria for Chuyuka murdering their parents 2 decades ago when the 10-year war ended. Long story short, she and her brother survived his attack, in which Cole Eriksson somehow rescued them, and they'd lived in Nordica ever since. Was she the only Siskonen who craved adventure, and the only reason he bothered venturing to South Nordica was to find a way to punish Chuyuka? Miko, stop. Stop. Her raised voice prompted him to turn around. What are you thinking? We're surrounded by Temurian soldiers. I'm thinking about finding out what's up and letting Cole and the Firebirds in on it. If the Temurians upped the ante in bullying elementals, our own kind, Cole's going to know about this. He has Firebirds spying on Temurian forces all over the place down here. Spies don't catch everything. Miko. She gritted her teeth. Don't freaking get involved in things you can't control. What are going to do, Vork? Drag me home? Get back to the network and I'll meet you there. She again grabbed for him, but he shoved her shoulder first into the brick building. Fighting tears, she rubbed her now throbbing shoulder, the pain of which radiated into her arm as she followed him at a distance. Despite Miko's temperament, he'd never assaulted her, even if he'd engaged in plenty of fights. There was no talking to him. No stopping him. Nothing that would keep him from doing the exact thing he threatened for years. An opportunity to hurt as many Temurians as possible as payback for what Chuyuka did to their parents and the oppressive status in which elementals like themselves lived under in South Nordica. Valkyrie drew a breath as the opposite end of the alleyway came into sight. Miko turned around, brought up his hologram, and pushed the record button. Chapter 7, Sean, the 31st of July, 8 a.m., Irontown. Although his girlfriend's family had little to no money and lived in perhaps the most poverty-stricken neighborhood in Irontown's slums, Lurie's mother, Myra Vyomnin, always went out of her way when she had a guest in the house. Plus, she wouldn't take no for an answer, so Sean forced dessert down his throat. A small piece of pie. Nothing that would chew eaten the 6-pack, 8-pack when he dehydrated himself enough, any time soon. After spending the night roasting in the attic, the sun peeked through at 7:30. He got up, showered, and dressed, ready to move back into his dorm room at Cindergaard to begin his senior season of thrashball and finally get on with his fitness career if he didn't get drafted into the Colonial Thrashball League, South Nordica's Pro League, first. Despite his small size of 5 feet, 5 inches and 145 pounds, his IQ for the game, skill set, and playing style warranted more than a few scouts to tune come 8 in the morning. His fantasy took him to the edge of the hill on which Irontown Heights sat, overlooking the metropolis, Lurie at his side. Her eyes widened the second she glimpsed downtown. Occupation doubled overnight. Navy blue military trucks backed into the town square while armed soldiers manned the sidewalks and street corners. Even more disturbing, middle-aged and older residents led their kids toward the square. Distant shouts reached their ears, and Lurie's eyes sat on the verge of panic. "What's going on here?" Sean said. Lurie bit her bottom lip and shook her head, interlocking her shaking fingers through his. "Are you all right?" She closed her eyes and drew a long breath. "Come on. You got everything?" "Lurie. I'm sure it's nothing, Sean. Let's just get to campus." "We were right. They're targeting, I know. When they reached the base of the hill, a Temurian soldier approached and pointed an electronic device at their watches, which brought up their holograms. Conscription lottery at what? Sean said, his hologram disintegrating. We'll be there. Lily shot Sean a death stare and flashed her backpack. We just need to drop our stuff off over at Cindergard first. She nudged Sean in the ribs and he forced a grimace. The soldier waved the device in front of them. You'd best hang around. Anyone between the ages of 16 and 25 detected outside the town square come noon are subject to a long-term prison sentence. Luri looked at the commotion in the town square where rows of high school and college kids stood, concern in their faces. She returned her gaze to the soldier. We won't be late. We're senior college athletes, so we don't need to do any paperwork over there or anything. I will know, Luri Vyomnin and Sean Zoa. Sean narrowed his eyes. I don't remember telling you our names. He again flashed the device and smirked. I now know more about you than you'll ever know about yourselves. It collects your IP address, shows me past websites you've visited, your genetic mutation, birth date, business transactions, parents, areas of residence, and even your college major. It'll also let me track your location. The soldier nodded at Sean's watch. Tech goes a long way these days. As they strolled toward the subways, other soldiers pointed identical devices at them, as though instructed to do so on any citizen appearing college-aged, give or take a couple of years. Stanley whispered, her hologram dissipating for the 5th time. Yeah. Follow my lead. What lead? Where did you say you were in the draft prospect rankings again? He arched an eyebrow, his mind going through off doomsday scenarios now that a military draft took place. Where did you say you were in the draft prospect rankings? I can remember. Sean caught the hint at her wide eyes and expectant stare. Oh, I think I was like the 13th rated passing center in the colony. About a 4th or 5th round draft pick. If I were a few inches taller and about 30 pounds heavier, I'd be a shoo-in first rounder. He tried to smile, but the light of optimism inside him extinguished. If Temuria pulled his birth date, well, it was something he'd have to discuss with Luri before they stepped into the square. Since they both held mutant status and illegally practiced their mutations for years, they wouldn't even make it to the basic training barracks if Temuria drafted after one test. The Temurians would discover their higher-than-base levels for mutants lacking formal training, reserved only for those serving in the Temurian armed forces. And per Temurian law, they considered it treason to practice ability behind their backs. This stemmed from the 10-year war, in which the most accomplished fighters taking arms against Temuria possessed mutations. Smoke protruded in the distance while shouts echoed. Sean scoffed. Someone's putting up a fight. Well, it will not be us. Luri, have you ever read about these conscription lotteries? Of course I have. You know as well as I do they pull 183 birth dates. That's a 50-50 shot. What if they draw ours? We'll worry about it if we have to. But I'm not letting you in danger. Boom. Something sounding like an explosion rocked the street. Luri raised her eyebrows. What was that? Boom. Sounded like a mutant fire blast. Sean drew a breath and sent a text to Erno to make sure his cousins weren't in the same predicament. He also loosened his watch. If he had to grab Luri and run, getting rid of the watch meant they couldn't track him. What are you doing? Luri flinched as another explosion rocked the ground. Sean? Answer me. He swept down the sidewalk, toward the source of the noise that appeared to come from the town square. Luri may want to take the chance and stay behind in hopes no one drew June 21st, but there was no way he'd risk his life attending the draft. There was a 50% chance of Temuria drawing either his or Luri's birth dates, and he would not stand by and watch them take her life away. Sure, they fought and disagreed on every petty subject over the past 12 months. It seemed like anything he did was wrong, and he welcomed a breakup from her controlling vice grip. But he'd never stop caring for her, nor would he stop protecting her. Even if he had to drag her out of this city kicking and screaming. He bolted from one end of the street and jogged behind about 50 others wandering toward the commotion as another blast, this one a Fisher attack from an Earth mutant, sunk 2 Temurian military trucks into the ground, their drivers and soldiers fleeing the vehicle and presenting their weapons. A riot. Someone, perhaps a group of mutants in the same predicament as he, thought it better to fight than take flight. Beside Sean, a wind mutant with long, curly hair waved up street debris and loose asphalt from the ground that the Earth mutant split and sent a dust devil attack at the soldiers. Lurie clapped a hand over her mouth as the maneuver swept the driver and 2 soldiers away. Sean turned to her with a raised eyebrow and she grabbed his wrist, tearing to drag him from the budding riot. Temurian soldiers darted forward to reinforce their snuggling buddies. 3 total, it appeared. They raised their rifles, one of which pointed to Lurie's head. As she flinched, Sean leaped into a windsurf, a neutral wind maneuver in which he went airborne and soared through the air as if riding an invisible surfboard. He tossed a gust at the soldiers, knocking them back first into the wall of the nearest building. A dull thud stated the blow at least dazed his targets, but he wasn't about to stick around and let them recover. Unfortunately, 2 more Temurian soldiers witnessed the assault, pursued, and fired. Sean threw another gust behind him as a bullet whizzed past his ear. Below, Lurie burst into a smoke vapor, probably on instinct, disappeared, and reappeared on his surf, shooting him a deadlier set of daggers than he'd ever witnessed during the nearly 2 decades he'd known her. The riot intensified below. Mutant strikes of every kind erupted as Temurian soldiers fired on mutant civilians, and perhaps non-mutants. Sean read a text from Erno informing him he, Timo, and Hannah would return home tomorrow to pack their things and take off for Irontown. He sent a reply telling them to stay out of the city because of the lottery and in as few words as possible, described the riot taking place. After sending the text, Sean dropped his watch. It would keep Temuria off their tail in the short term. Lurie tossed Sean a pious look bearing more defeat than she'd ever shown during a heartbreaking loss in Thrashball before tossing her watch. She grabbed his wrist and burst into another smoke vapor. Sean's stomach jerked, and his boots touched the ground on the outskirts of another metropolis. Kaiti, by the looks of it. Lurie looked ahead before pacing back and forth, fingers running through her brown hair. Every now and again, she'd turn toward the city skyline and take 2 steps toward it before backing off and resuming her pacing. "Hey!" Sean said. "Can you talk?" "Shut up," she snapped. "Lurie, what did you expect?" "I said, shut up." She trembled, wrapped her arms around herself, and scurried toward a forested tree line on the opposite end. Sean struggled to keep up. "Lurie, let's talk about this." She held a hand to his face. "I need time to think, Sean." "Think? About what? Tell me one way we could have avoided that. What do you got?" She turned on him, nostrils flaring, jetted a fist forward, and blew a smoke screen into his face. Sean gagged as the billowing substance invaded his lungs. "What are you telling to do? Kill me? Hello?" Lurie stormed to a cobbled trail leading into the unknown. "Hey!" He jogged toward her, throat and chest burning from minor smoke inhalation. "Kaiti's in the other direction." She whipped around. "Do you really think it's smart to sneak into another city?" He turned to the skyline and spread his arms. "Do you see any riots? Checkpoints?" Lurie pointed to her bare wrist. "How would you explain our lack of watches? The second Temurian soldiers spot us without them, we're done. Thanks for delaying our death sentences." Sean drew a breath. We need to at least find out what's happened. Listen, they may not even have gotten our faces. I mean, there were a lot of people wreaking havoc. Maybe someone torched the cameras. How do you plan on sneaking in? There's bound to be a checkpoint, and we just got rid of our IDs. Sean threw his arms up. Okay, I know you think what I did was irrational, but we don't need to assume guilt just yet. What you just did back in Irontown was a suicide mission. You won't know for sure unless we find out what's going on. Now let's just calm down and get to a telescreen. If we see anything crazy, we'll bolt. Lily ran a hand down her face. You expect to get past these checkpoints how? How about you varp us in? Yeah, there's a reason I've never just varped us into Irontown before to avoid checkpoints. Irontown isn't the only city in South Nordica with cameras on every street corner and drones circling overhead. Sean shook his head. Unless we varp into KT-used Chlu Ashball Stadium. No one's in there at this time of the year. There are no cameras and we can sneak out Chlu off the main gate. We'll be fine, all right. Chapter 8, Valkyrie, the 31st of July, 8:30 a.m., New Nordican City. Mikko, please, before someone sees you. Shut up. Her brother aimed his camera from the shadows of the alley, but with well enough of a vantage point to capture the action. Intuition stated Mikko wanted to do more than just capture Temurian soldiers bullying elementals and college kids on camera. No, he waited for a prime opportunity to at least hurt a few of them if he could get away with it. Especially since they had a way out if they were lucky enough to evade capture. More Temurian soldiers flooded the streets, with many exiting military and scout vehicles. They lined the sidewalks, while others flooded the corners, stopping anyone appearing to be college-aged or younger and forcing them to show identification. Mikko dissipated his hologram and took off into the opposite alley, slipping by so fast not a single Temurian authority saw him. She darted behind a parked scout vehicle. Once it became clear they were all busy targeting others her age, she took off into the opposite alley, trailing Mikko. Had they left when she insisted, they never would have had to sneak out of town. Now, Mikko screwed them. Even if she informed him on the runes, odds were, he'd refuse to listen. Intuition again struck, this time stating Temurian reinforcements would arrive and bar exit to the city, if they hadn't already done so. Now, the only way out was to hop onto Mikko's metal surf if he could mold something with no one noticing from the ground, or drones from the air. Odds were, and Cole told her horror stories, events like this happened before a military draft. Without prior warning, Temuria would control the city streets, close off access to town, and often the day before, ID those entering, to verify an estimate of how many they expected to attend the draft lottery. The following morning, they'd raid houses, collect kids, and lead them in front of a government building, where at a specified time, the lottery began. However, not all of these soldiers shunted kids forward. Instead, they scanned their watches with a strange device. Probably a new techno revelation. This increased Valkyrie's blood pressure. Her watch, made from a Nordican brand name, was untraceable, as tracking private citizens in the free nation was illegal. Here in South Nordica, Cole wasn't lying when he told them it was mandatory for all South Nordican citizens not only to possess and wear the watches, but to keep the tracking devices turned on. The Temurians sold the so-called safety benefits such as finding missing people, monitoring one's health and vital signs that would prevent emergency situations, a safe and effective means of monetary exchange, and even allowing authorities to gain camera access to off the watch, supposedly to deter crime, prompted the South Nordican public and those across the empire to demand a law requiring watches to be put in place. If Temuria caught her and Mikko scootering through town, not only would their watches fail to scan, but they were Nordican elemental masters. that had death sentence written all over it. Cole would find out the hard way that they snuck into South Nordica behind his back. Cursing Mikko, Valkyrie caught her brother taking yet another video at the end of this alley, which held even a greater number of military personnel and vehicles. Mikko, what in the freaking holy name of Trinity are you thinking? He tossed her his most dangerous glare. I thought I told you to shut up and stay in your lane. Valkyrie's jaw dropped. Do you not realize we're stuck in NYC? South freaking Nordican territory, with half the Temurian army in town rounding up people our age. They ain't getting away with this. I've stood on the sidelines and seen enough. What are you going to do, Mikko? Attack and reignite a war? One we wouldn't have the resources to fight? Temuria would slaughter us. Vork, don't give me that. There's a reason Chiyuka and Magnu won't touch Nordica. Yet. This isn't your war to fight. She grabbed his tank top. Listen to me, we need to get out of here. Now. I'm sure they've already closed the streets, so you need to mold a stray steel beam or something and metal earth us as far away from here as we can. Mikko threw her a disgruntled look that bordered on annoyance. As much of a tool as her brother was, she hadn't seen him like this since he tried to nail a defenseless opponent headfirst into the turf following a brutal Chlu Ash ball game against the Vanicity Sonics, their team's chief rival. Had Chlu teammates not restrained him, Mikko could have expected to take his senior season off. Because although Cole raised them, he wouldn't hesitate to suspend Mikko for such actions. A distant shout erupted, and gunshots filled the air. On instinct, Valkyrie manifested her sword as Mikko tore from the alley, the jacket he tied around his waist earlier swaying behind him. A blast from a fire elemental flashed in front of her and set two Temurian vehicles ablaze. Mikko, come on. Valkyrie again tried to grab her brother's arm, but the sweat glistening from it caused her hand to slip. Mikko pointed his sword at the nearest Temurian soldier, a non-elemental given his military rifle. The man harassed a kid who looked no older than high school age before Mikko molded the weapon into what resembled a baton and snuck him over the head. Bile invaded Valkyrie's throat, although she hadn't touched food in over 12 hours. The way the soldier's skull cracked, this assault would draw unwanted attention. Mikko grabbed the ailing soldier by the cloak collar. That's just a little payback from the son of Nils Siskonen. Tell his old friend Chiyuka that Mikko Siskonen said hello. He slammed the soldier onto the asphalt and tossed a satisfied look toward the budding riot. Valkyrie reached her brother and spun him around, pointing her sword at his Chluot. She hated to do this, but it was the only way. If you don't get us out, I'm cutting you open, surfing us out of here, and taking whatever punishment Cole gives us. Enough is enough. Mikko raised his hands and molded a loose piece of metal debris from the ground before hopping on it while lifting Valkyrie onto his metal earth. She kept her sword of blood pointed in the event he'd again forget himself. Mutant masters, dead ahead. Valkyrie whipped about, where three Temurian elemental masters tailed them. One brandished a copper-hilt sword of wood, another boasted an alloy sword of metal, and a third, sword of smoke. The metal master aimed his sword at Mikko's debris and attempted to mold it into something so small it would put both him and Valkyrie at risk of falling to their deaths. Mikko touched his sword tip to the makeshift metal surfboard, veins protruding from his neck as he struggled to maintain the object's shape. The smoke master grinned at Valkyrie, slashed, and conjured a greenish substance known as a radiation varp. The nuclear attack would kill if she breathed in the toxins for too long, or else cause significant lung damage. She retaliated with a slash, and the burgundy claw mark her sword carved from thin air clashed with the varp, deflecting it inches before it overtook them. As Mikko struggled with the metal master, the Woodmaster saw his opportunity and directed his sword at one of the many trees planted on the sidewalks. As a niche element of earth and wind, the Woodmaster could control any wooden object, dry it out, and mold it to their liking. The tree disintegrated into shards the size and shape of bullets. Miko's eyes widened at the incoming barrage and ascended. However, when he tore his gaze from the debris, the opposing metal master molded so thin Valkyrie slipped. The smoke master saw his chance and launched another nuclear strike. However, the green smoke missed her by inches as she free fell. Valkyrie counted her blessings and slashed 3 times, hitting the man with a triple slash maneuver behind his back, drawing blood in the base of his neck, mid-back, and lumbar regions. 50 feet from falling to her death and stomach in her throat, she SVMNG once again, fusing the elemental's blood with the smoke cloud on which the ailing soldier rode in a smoke surf, as they called it up in Nordica. When blood merged with the smoke, the cloud turned the same, sickening shade of green. However, now that she controlled the cloud, its toxicity wouldn't affect her. Valkyrie summoned the substance under her feet right before they collided with the ground, kicked off the smoke master, and catapulted upward thousands of feet in the air, and standing on the metal debris as if it were a balance beam, Miko dueled the metal master. They summoned metal objects from below, molded them into their own bullet-like shards, and went back and forth. As they deflected the others' attacks, it rained metal, striking soldiers, civilians, and would-be draftees. Valkyrie screwed up her face at the collateral damage until a 5-foot log struck her toxic cloud. She snuggled to maintain balance before a spear-like shard whizzed past her shoulder. The Woodmaster pursued as he left his buddy to deal with her brother. She pointed her sword at the man's throat, hoping to cut the blood supply to his brain. A resounding gasp and bulging eyes stated she'd done her job. The man dropped his sword and clawed at his throat, face and lips turning blue. If he could move or speak, she bet he'd tap out. The man collapsed to his knees, with nothing but the log on which he surfed holding him up. Valkyrie sighed and descended, dropping the semi-conscious soldier off on the asphalt and easing her iron grip as she surfed toward her brother. Thanking Trinity and Stoichia, the Temurian soldiers were busy with the increasing number of rioters. She focused on the one thing that mattered, rescuing Miko and dragging him back to the network. When she reached them, the Metal Master flew eaten to overpower her brother. While Miko dodged the incoming shower of metal shards, his debris grew so slim it surprised her not to see him free fall. With the Metal Master focused on landing the kill shot, Valkyrie directed the sword tip at the man's back. Her attack gave off the sensation of a heart attack and the man dropped his sword before clasping both hands over his chest. Miko, nowhere near as forgiving as Valkyrie, struck the man in the abdomen with what remained of his makeshift metal raft. As he and the Temurian free fell, Valkyrie swooped and he landed on her toxic surf. "Can't believe you drew," he said. Unlike other elementals, blood elementals had to draw the blood of another to perform their surf maneuver. It was an annoying trait and perhaps Valkyrie's least favorite part of her blood mastery. But she admitted it saved her life today. It came from the Smoke Master. She shook her head. "I knocked him off his smoke surf and the Wood Master came after me. I beat all 3 of them, so you're welcome. Now, I'm getting us out of here and don't you dare try anything so idiotic ever again." With the riot gaining steam under them, and only Trinity knew who was behind it, emerging from what was now a bird's-eye view from the treetops as they jetted toward NAC's outskirts on her toxic cloud, they slipped out of town, unnoticed. And when they caught the next subway home, Miko wouldn't hear the end of it from her. Even if someone else started the riot, Temuria would come looking the second they realized she'd dueled, defeated, and possibly killed 3 of their elemental masters. Since South Nordican cities set up street cameras every 100 yards, they'd catch her identity sooner than later. Thank the god and goddess she lived in Nordica. And pray that they wouldn't trace her back to the Free Nation, where Chuyuka would spin it into an act of war. Chapter 9, Chuyuka, the 31st of July, 10 a.m., New Nordican City. After signing the Peace Act into law, Lord Chuyuka unlocked his hologram as a dark-skinned man stared back. Morpheus, I'd like to thank you for all your help in revealing Mikko and Valkyrie Siskonin's location. They suspected nothing, I presume. Morpheus held up his stack of preview magazines. Business, as usual, sir. They thought this interaction was no different from the previous. I just wish I knew who they were sooner. Their evasiveness fooled even myself. I had the toughest time tracking their whereabouts. Tougher than even that of Zoa, Vyomnin, and his little cousins, the Karko siblings. Been a while since I had to use more manual means of tracking criminals. Morpheus pulled his lips in. There's a reason for that, sir. Chuyuka motioned his underground rep to Kanei on. I regret I should have been clearer when you inquired about the Siskonins earlier this week. Mikko and Valkyrie Siskonin, sir, are not South Nordican. As I learned when I gave them those false identification photos and planted them in the database when they were just college freshmen. They came from Nordica and you opted to withhold this vital information from the Temurian Enforcement Agency? From myself? Did you take a liking to them, despite their residency within the terrorist state? Morpheus glowered from the hologram and again shook the previews. Did they not prove their worth to our enterprise time and again? You realize how much money we have split from profiteering on the underground gambling market, thanks to the Siskonins? You, your agencies, and myself. Because two Nordican mutant masters extended your paycheck, you cut corners. Are you denying involvement in such operations? It's news to me that the Siskonins were the ones supplying those NTA season previews. And your job was to act like a friend and provide fake IDs to anyone looking to infiltrate our land and alert the authorities. I don't care how much money they inadvertently brought into the Empire and more importantly, South Nordica. Do you not realize who these kids are? Obviously not, Lord Chuyuka. Or else we wouldn't be having this conversation. I've spent the last 20 freaking years of my life digging through a top-secret operation in which I've confided in few, including yourself, since you've proven beyond worthy. This summer, I made a groundbreaking discovery regarding not just the Siskonins, but Zoa, the Karko siblings, and Lariv Lorunin. Plus another, who's already in my custody. I ravaged the Tuscarora native Nordican reserve by feigning to the public that we were short on resources, and picked off that particular reserve for a reason. The Tuscarora reserve was the home of mutant warlord, Wild Bull Igleski, and his vocal loyalty to Cole Erickson. That's on you, Lord Chuyuka. Morpheus adjusted his navy blue combat cloak. You knew full well a known disciple of Cole Erickson frequented your colony, and it took you 20 years to do something about it. I let the terrorist live in my colony and serve as a leader to and brainwash his people because he, or they, were not yet needed. And you suddenly decided to kill him and the entire tribe? Care to lead me on? The daughter of Wild Bull Igleski was my person of interest. But since we could classify the natives as mutant warlords who undoubtedly viewed Cole Erickson in a favorable light, it wouldn't hurt to feign a crisis. Feign a crisis? You had those soldiers killed. Chuyuka grinned. Smart man. Killed by the few native mutants he planted on the reserve decades ago to keep an eye on old Wild Bull. The native had no idea. Nor did those plants thinking he'd equal them equal rights after they carried out the task. Lightning's and Alton's units took care of them. Morpheus glowered into the hologram. Chuyuka glared back. If looks could kill, he'd have offed this idiot. The Siskonins were in NNC, even if for some strange reason not a single one of his soldiers could track their whereabouts until Morpheus revealed they supplied the NTA previews. Now it was apparent. They wore Nordican watches because they snuck down here from Nordica. Somehow, some way. And it was on this man in front of him. Chuyuka Worthy's most trusted undercover agent posing as a kingpin in the NNC black market, which Chuyuka himself controlled. Further, He was no closer to discovering how the Cisconans, along with any other Nordican caught lurking in South Nordica, made it down this way while evading detection. Cole Eriksson had his ways for as long as Chiuka knew him. Yet after years of speculation on Chiuka's part, long before he became supreme leader, the constant infiltration of South Nordica from that terrorist state remained shrouded in mystery. You better hope, Morpheus, that we can capture and off the Cisconans. If authorities can't find them, or if we conclude they've somehow returned to Nordica under our noses, I will execute you in their place. Morpheus pulled a holographic badge from his cloak and dropped it to the floor before unhooking his watch. I guess you're going hunting for more than 2 souls in the NNC. And I got more people watching my back than you'll ever know. Your arrogance, Chiuka-worthy, has and will continue to haunt you. Morpheus's screen flickered and disappeared. Before Chiuka flinched to order the man's arrest, his hologram buzzed again. What? Major Adonis Ree stared back, his gaze determined. Reporting from Irontown, South Nordica, sir. Chiuka narrowed his eyes at the commotion in the background. I'm afraid I have horrendous news, sir. Adonis' eyes widened at Chiuka's glare. There has been a mutant attack prior to your conscription lottery. A nearby fire blast upended a car 20 yards behind Ree, and the young officer ducked to avoid oncoming debris. Chiuka leaned forward. Call for reinforcements from the Cybex base, alert Eviaran in Irontown's Reserve Continental Guard, and quell this thing before it gets out of control. Yes, sir. I want all city cameras within the vicinity delivered to Intel to discover where it started and who's responsible for the upheaval. Yes, sir. Anything else? Reports have come in from a similar event here in New Nordican City, and Intel knows who's behind it. We must check in with. Chiuka's watch buzzed again, and he pulled up a second hologram. Captain Sue's Tice screen eyes widened with urgency. Don't tell me they also hit Irontown. She rested her gaze on Ree before looking back to Chiuka. The square and Main Street downtown are in shambles. Ree again ducked to avoid another wave of attacks. Tice shook her head. This is a coordinated mutant uprising, Lord Chiuka. What's the situation in? She froze. Chiuka's gaze must have tipped her off. 3 anti-conscription riots, 3 cities, Chiuka said. Tice arched an eyebrow. Anti-conscription? It wouldn't be anything else. We ordered conscription for the East Oceanic War in 3 different cities via Operation 462, all of which sparked riots from their mutant populations. Younger people who we were to target. Tell me, have you seen non-mutant normies out there? Or just mutant aggressors? Ree and Tice exchanged dark glances. Tice, contact the Temurian Enforcement Agency and send intel video on all the affected areas in Atlantean City. Call on reinforcements from the Harris base to put a stop to this. Hunt down any and all mutants your facial rec technology detects. Tice nodded, and her hologram dissipated. As for you, Ree blast. Another fire maneuver upended Ree and his hologram froze, looking to the buildings from the street as rogue mutants unleashed their fury on Temurian authorities. Chiuka bounced his eyebrows. I will note your death in today's riots as an unfortunate occurrence, Major. I'll be sure to hold a vigil on the evening news. He dissipated the hologram and brought up another, looking to contact those who could bring forward his most wanted people of the hour. Mutants like Sean Zoa and Larry Viarunen. His primary persons of interest. Yes, he already had his list, even if he had no evidence of them instigating the Irontown riots. No worries. He just had to claim intel confirmed via classified video too disturbing for TV, and every normie in South Nordica would fall for it. Ditto for the Cisconans. But, it was best if he at least had attained video of the kid, the son of that piece of swine ex-friend of his, Loki Zoa, revealing his wind mutation. Just so it added to the legitimacy. Chapter 10, Raj, the 31st of July, 10:30 a.m., New Nordican City. So much for waiting nearly 24 years for a first date. Okay, 23 and 2 years. Raj rolled her eyes. 3/4. What was she, in first grade still? The stupid kid was so obnoxious. She saw through him in 2 seconds that he was one of those self-entitled preps who attained his position because of his bloodlines. And last night's date confirmed all she knew. He's lucky she didn't engulf him in a fire spin when he turned around. Spending the evening talking about himself, his accolades, and pulling the not what you know, but who you know card. What a freaking fraud of a human being. Her watch buzzed and Chuyuka's face appeared on the ID. What? Pull up your telescreen tab. Why? Just do as I say without question for once. Raj rolled her eyes and tuned into the South Nordican News Network, where cameras descended on the Irontown skyline, the headline bearing, South Nordica under attack, mutants storm Irontown streets in protest of conscription lottery. Raj's jaw dropped. She didn't need the accompanying news broadcast to tell her this was the most serious event since the 10-year war. A conflict that ended with the deaths of her mother and grandparents. Who started this? Intel confirmed wind mutant Sean Zoa and smoke mutant Larry Vyomnin instigated the attack from Sindegard University, where they are both students. Now get out of bed and get dressed. I am sending you off to hunt down Zoa. He may be traveling alone or even with Vlorunin, but Intel has yet to confirm his present location. Raj raced to her window, where smoke billowed from downtown NAC in the distance. Why Irontown? Looks like it's not the only place Zoa and Vlorunin cooked. You're not going into Irontown. I have commanders taking care of NNC and units hunting him and Vlorunin in Irontown in the event they are still in the city. You will rendezvous with your Temurian youth units. Look up Zoa's identification profile and past whereabouts. They can lead to clues about where he's headed. You're further authorized to use lethal force on any dissenting mutant. If his data states he's still in Irontown. Current data claims he and Vlomnin have been on the same street in Irontown over the past hour, indicating they got rid of their watches. They could be anywhere in the colony. All right, fine. Am I erupting to the base? Where you will await military transport. Chuyuka's hologram disintegrated as action from another outlet emerged onto the holographic telescreen. Judging from the shoreline, it appeared Atlantean City also saw action, where mutant strikes from 8 of the 9 elements lit the skyline. Within an hour, Raj dressed in her navy blue military cloak laden with red accents. She placed her sword of fire into its familiar sheath, and erupted to the base, where teens in her youth unit stood at attention, in 10 rows of 100. She narrowed her gaze to hide the breath that she drew. It was the first time any of these kids had seen live action. A massive curveball since she'd been training each for the harsh environments in the East Oceanics. We're under clear orders to hunt down Sean Zoa, the perpetrator of today's riot. I want my mutant soldiers on the front lines, non-mutants behind them. Lord Chuyuka has authorized the use of lethal force against any dissenting mutant you deem necessary. Are we clear? Her soldiers shouted their agreement and moved into the aircraft that would transport them to. Raj brought up her hologram comprising the kids' data. Wild Valley, South Nordica. Sean Zoa's home for the last 20 years. Doesn't one's family know best? Raj was about to find out. Even if she had to torture the kid's aunt and uncle. Now this was a justifiable means to an end. Not a stupid, inexcusable land grab. And she would get rid of anyone, mutant or non-mutant, stepping up to defend her person of interest. Chapter 11, Cole, the 31st of July, 11 a.m., Oslo's port. Nordica Cole Eriksson spent the morning making and taking calls from his undercovers stationed in South Nordica. Lord Tjuuka would blame these riots on him, even if he had zero knowledge of the events until this morning. It was classic Temuria and their never let a good crisis go to waste mantra. Odds were, not a single elemental down south started this thing, let alone one with connections to him. Though Tjuuka would already have his instigator. A name and a face, or several, whose odds at having something to do with the riots sat between slim and none, with Slim catching a bus out of town. Elementals lived as second-class citizens, perhaps a cut above the native Nordicans, since Temuria colonized and gained influence over South Nordica. Why would they wait until now to evoke a riot? And on the day of a conscription lottery no one but the Temurian and South Nordican governments knew about? What timing? The last time Temuria conscripted, it was for the 10-year war and no one knew of the lottery until the day of. Perhaps except for a few notable loyalists and those in government. It was a long shot for any elemental down there to plan these riots unless they had insider information from the Temurian, or in this case, the South Nordican government. This was a false flag. One Tjuuka created. Plus, it fits Temuria's narrative. Since before even the 10-year war, the global power had become experts at playing victim. Temuria often staged or provoked such attacks and blamed those in a nation or region abroad they held an interest in. Or in this case, domestic terrorism. It meant one thing: Tjuuka wanted to declare war on his elemental population. A population Temuria and the rest of the world profiled and oppressed for millennia. Despite the total hypocrisy that those encouraging the oppressing were elemental masters, themselves, like Tjuuka. However, after 2,000 years of varying global powers coaxing the public into believing they could trust any elemental serving in government and the military, a double standard of cognitive dissonance developed and held true to this day. As the masses refused to TMST average, everyday elementals in their governments ravaged the world for land and resources. Who were the dangerous elementals again? Nordica acted as the sole exception to perpetual profiling and oppression, and its elemental population grew in droves since the 10-year war ended, attracting elementals from all over the world seeking liberty to practice their abilities. Eriksson's watch buzzed. "Ah, Lord, is your daughter raring to begin her sophomore year at U of N?" A man with almond-shaped eyes and bronze skin stared back. "It is all Alisa talks about with her two best friends, Lord Eriksson. But I bring you good and bad news." "Continue, my friend." "The good news first. Our top firebird stationed in the area has unveiled the son of Loki Zoa is alive, as is the daughter of Tyr Viarunen." Cole raised his eyebrows. "Sean Zoa. Plus Lyri Viarunen?" Lord Mustrusa flashed a rare smile. More of a grin. "You understand what this means? Mikko and Vork aren't the only two left. Or three, if you count the one in Tjuuka's custody. Including Shire Eagleski, there's 6. I plan to stop at the Tuscarora network tomorrow to collect Shire. I've been unable to contact Wild Bull's reserve office over the past 24 hours, so I'm hoping she hasn't gotten second thoughts on this generous surprise I have for her. But I may need to make a second trip after all. How did they discover Sean and Lyri were alive? Their homes were destroyed 20 years ago and I was quite certain they had perished in the Talvi bombings. Pull up a second tab, Lord Eriksson. I have a video from their mainstream news outlet, which serves as the bad news. But it will tell you everything you must know." Eriksson obliged, where Sean Zoa's photo, along with Lyri Viamunen's, shone on the screen, with a headline under it labelled "Persons of Interest in Irontown Anti-Conscription Riots." And under it, Iberia and Cole Eriksson of Nordica believed to have sponsored terrorist attacks. The report droned about their elemental status, and how the town's elementals followed their lead. Their evidence. Cole said. The report earlier stated classified video too disturbing for television. As I suspected. Chuyuka has nothing. Do you believe Chuyuka Worthy has discovered their true identities? I believe so, yes. The screen split and displayed the burning City Hall building in NNC. Roku's eyes widened as Miko's and Vok's photos emerged. Those two. Cole muttered. There's only one way they'd have gotten a hold of false identification. They discovered your networks, took off for South Nordica, and visited the black markets. They first snuck down there 3 years ago. And to this day, they thought they'd have a bit of fun. He shook his head. Ever since we took them in 20 years ago, Roku, I've never seen two kids wander off as much as they. It amras they upped the ante. Thankfully, Miko and Vok made it back to the Phoenix City network. But it wouldn't stop Cole from reprimanding them, for who knew how many times they ventured from Nordican lands and into South Nordica via the networks besides the other times he'd caught them in the act. Since they still had a few hours to travel from Phoenix City to Oslo's port, Cole needed to fill his teenage granddaughter in, as she was the only one other than his wife Iona he confided in of their significance. And she would soon learn about Igleski, Zoa, and Vyomnin. He led his pouting granddaughter inside and motioned for her to sit on the cardinal red armchair across the fireplace. Did you watch the news? Did you jump to conclusions that pad your little sacred text narrative? Your adopted brother and sister, along with Sean Zoa and Larry Vyomnin, wouldn't be persons of interest with no evidence connecting them to instigate this otherwise. You have no clear-cut evidence. For all you know, Miko and Valkyrie partied too hard and did something stupid. Perhaps you should hear their accounts. Kura scoffed. You're really going to believe them? You know how many times Miko told me he'd like nothing more than to cause as much harm to Temurian officials as possible. You think Valkyrie would stop him from doing so? Those two, Miko especially, have looked to avenge their parents' deaths since they learned of their ability. Might I remind you they discovered their ability before you even learned to talk and walk? That they both reached elemental mastery during their freshman year? The first since their parents and Velwai few others. Kura glowered. You know what I mean? She wrapped the book labeled The Sacred Texts on the adjacent end table. Listen, I know you old-timers want to believe in fairy tales, but they are just it. There's nothing significant about Sean Zoa. There's nothing significant about Valkyrie and Miko. The tribe of Valatute mentioned in these books has never been found nor traced because it never existed. If it had, we'd have traced them back centuries ago. Unless someone wished to stamp out the line and made it so, Kura. As I have told you in the past. Kura rolled her eyes. Oh, goodness help me. Here come more of the dumb little conspiracy theories. You know world history. I know your narrative of world history. There are many sides to a story. You know how every strong empire contributed to brutal ethnic cleansings of anyone they believed were associated with the tribe. They never once mentioned Valatute, of course, they wouldn't, if they wanted to maintain their manufactured credibility. And you also know there's a reason you can't venture anywhere else in this world without getting profiled. Kura twisted her lips. Since the global are always out for blood, it should provide more than enough evidence that the tribe existed and their people were sacred to the goddess Trinity and the god, Stoa. First off, you need evidence yourself to know beyond any doubt Sean Zoa and Larry Vlorunin had nothing to do with this. Ditto for Miko and Valkyrie. If you were listening, Kura, I have already mentioned that I contacted Miko and Vok when they returned safely to Phoenix City. They both attest that they didn't even realize a riot was taking place. Miko admitted he hung around and recorded the strange happenings, which will provide evidence enough. Kura crossed her arms. Seeing is believing. Cole brought up his hologram and played Miko's video, depicting Temurian soldiers bullying residents, along with blasts that kicked off the riots. Obviously, it was a fire elemental firing the first shot. Then proved to me Sean and Larry were also victims of circumstance. She stood and swept toward the hallway. And I'd appreciate it if you didn't bother me again unless you have practical, and not biased evidence. You call this biased? Cole indicated the video hologram. Kura turned on her heel and scurried down the hallway. Cole shook his head at his granddaughter's ignorance. The girl knew every tale in the sacred texts by heart. She knew of every cleansing to the elemental race. Many of whom, true or false history, cleansed because of their ability and potential connection to Valachute. Kura also knew of 2 ancient relics in Cole's building that, per research, traced to the original elemental civilizations halfway across the world that originated in the northern Urian regions in a way. The Shield of Suomi and the Locket of Kai, which belonged to keepers of the wind and fire elements, the most powerful elementals in the world and direct descendants in the tribe of Valachute. And they once belonged to 2 of Cole's former students who walked this campus. His hologram buzzed with a text from Vork, stating they would pull into town at 10. It'd be a quick meeting before he took off into South Nordica the second he received word on potential locations of his persons of interest, Sean Zoa, Larry Vyomnin, and hopefully, Shire Eagleski. Chapter 12, Sean Kaiti, South Nordica. Sean's boots touched the artificial turf at midfield in Kaitiu's Thrashball Stadium. Just 9 months ago, he celebrated a big win for Syndergaard, spiking the ball on the team's midfield logo in the last seconds. Crazy how much of a difference 9 months make. Sean returned to Syndergaard that day a hero for assisting Larry in scoring the game-winning goal. Now, there was a good chance he'd never return to Irontown or even make it far into Kaiti without someone detecting his face. If cameras in Irontown caught him. Then again, they still looked at potential charges for abandoning their mandated watches. So even if Temuria did not link them to the riot in Irontown, they still had some worming out to do. Come on. Larry swept toward the tunnel so fast Sean jogged to keep up. It was clear she wanted to get in, catch the colonial news on one of the many telescreens in the streets, and bolt when she deemed it necessary. Sean slowed his jog and walked a half pace behind her. It was best to let her lead and take a back seat. While he was optimistic enough to at least try to allow the situation to come to pass or find a way to worm himself out of this, Larry still held fear and defeat in her eyes. Of course, it was obvious as to why. If Temuria figured out that he hit their soldiers with gusts and she wiped him out of there, they wouldn't just go after them. Sean's and Larry's families were also at risk of intense interrogation and surveillance. Larry's power walk morphed into a jog before it transformed into a run. Sean kept his distance until she stopped in the dank stadium corridors. It was strange, standing in the empty hallway, where their footsteps echoed off the concrete walls. Things were so silent the blood pounding in Sean's ears made the only real noise. He followed Larry to the main gate, which remained locked. However, not a soul walked within 100 yards of the place, as they could see on the other end. Larry grabbed Sean's hand and warped 2 feet outside the stadium, her eyes darting from right to left as though worried one of Kaiti's residents turned their head and watched them materialize at the wrong moment. Now in the heart of downtown Kaiti, Sean jerked his head toward an alleyway between the buildings. Their best bet was to remain in the shadows and take the back streets to one of the town squares, which held telescreens in all 4 corners. The news always played, regardless of the time of day, meaning the riot in Irontown would grace the headlines. After an uneventful half hour, Larry again overtook him and poked her head toward the crowded square. Sean peered over her shoulder, where thousands of residents tuned into the telescreens, many of whom wore disgusted looks, crossing their arms and shaking their heads as news reports flowed in from what looked like New Nordican City, which must have also seen action. "Hey, at least we weren't the only ones," he said. Lurie elbowed him in the ribs as voices from the newscast reached them. "Intelligence has now confirmed persons of interest believed to have instigated the riots." Sean's jaw dropped. "You gotta be kidding me." His own face stared back at him, along with Lurie's. He grabbed his girlfriend under the arms to keep her from collapsing to her knees. How in the world did they link them to starting the riots? They were nowhere near Cindergard when he first pointed out the mutant blasts to Lurie. Besides, most elementals threw more than base-level attacks at their Temurian overlords. The whole colony's looking. She ripped herself out of his grasp and backed down the alley. "We're the most wanted people in the freaking colony, Sean." Sean gestured to the telescreen, where surveillance video displayed him kicking into a windsurf before cutting off. The bottom of the screen lit up, stating Intel confirms Zoa's instigation of riots too graphic for television. "Lurie, we never instigated anything." He pointed back to the screen. "Something's not right here." She grabbed his hand in a vice grip. "We don't have time to argue. Odds are, they'll know we were here, too." Sean's stomach jerked and his body disintegrated into a smoky substance. His boots touched the ground in the middle of a forest, where beyond the trees an empty campground sat. Lurie released his hand and trotted off for the clearing, leaving him to dwell in his thoughts. Their life as fugitives from the world's most powerful empire had begun.